Today we are going to be going over the process of creating a comic book page. I have a goal for myself this year to create a bunch of little maybe 2 to 4 page comics. I've done one so far. I put off finishing the second one and I finally finished it. And I recorded most of that process and have recorded also some of the sort of initial stages. So I really wanted to go over that with you. I think it will be a lot of fun. So let's get started. So the first part of any project is planning. And so for comics, that means writing scripts, drawing thumbnails, designing all the characters. So it's quite involved. For this particular comic, you can see there's a scrap piece of paper in my sketchbook, which is where I wrote down the script, which is the first step that I take when writing a comic. You need to have like a good little nugget of a story. Ultimately, the comic is about the story. Yes, the art is important, but the story that's there is also like really, really important to how they exist and function. And then the next step is to do some thumbnails. The ones that I did were very quick. I kind of took one stab at it across the top of the page and then gave up and tried again after I did some studies because I realized I didn't really know how to draw buildings. I was still not super great on drawing buildings, but we're getting better. Then once I had done the thumbnails and had my script in and the character designs and everything done, I went into Clip Studio Paint and set up the panels. I don't have a recording of this. I did it quite a while ago. There was a big lapse in time between the completion of the first page and even beginning to work on the second page of this comic, which is not ideal, but it's fine. It's done now, and that's the most important part. So yes, I set up the panels, I put in the speech bubbles, and then I get to work. I do the speech bubbles first because I find that having them there allows you to figure out like what you actually need to draw, and by including them kind of as early as the thumbnailing stage, you avoid awkward panels that have speech bubbles that don't fit, or speech bubbles that end up covering up something that you really wanted to show. So it just sort of avoids a lot of problems by kind of factoring them in right from the very beginning. Another thing with this comic, speaking of panels, is that I kind of do a weird number of panels. I feel like I end up somewhere in between like French, like Franco-Belgian comics and American comics as far as like panels to page goes. I am planning to do the next one like slightly more pages but fewer panels per page, just as like a fun experiment, more in like a sort of like North American comic book style. I think personally I've always been really, really inspired by like French comics and how beautiful they are, and how many panels they have on a page is definitely like an influence on me and my own approach to comic books. But I also want to try doing other stuff. I think I'm in a really experimental phase with comics. Like I used to draw comics a ton when I was a kid, but I haven't drawn them since then. In fact, the very first piece of art I sold ever was a comic strip that I drew in elementary school to another friend for a whole quarter. But yeah, so like I have some experience with them and having done them in the past, but not any sort of serious actual experience. So I'm looking forward to getting more of that, but I just want to try different things, experiment a little bit, and figure out kind of what works best for me and the kinds of stories that I want to tell, and how I can tell those sort of best, I suppose. The next step after the page is all ready is to start sketching. Traditionally, I have like a red pencil that I use. I just have it, and so that's what I use. But digitally, I often will choose like a light blue kind of sketching color. I just find that it makes it easier to see the line art when you're going in versus like a gray. Personal preference, you could use green, purple. I don't think it really matters. And yeah, so then I go through and I sketch out every single panel. I did these fairly quickly. I really wanted to kind of get the gesture, especially for the one where he's got his fingers up like, ooh, creepy crawlies. I think in hindsight, I should have spent a little bit longer on these sketches. I really wanted to get this page done, and so I cut some corners, and I think it would have looked and turned out a bit better if I had spent a bit more time in kind of the foundational phases, but I think that's pretty, it's not a unique problem with my own work, let's say. I think it's always good to spend more time on the foundational stages of something before you skip ahead into the more fun parts. But I did not do that here, and I will have to take that as a lesson learned for next time. Moving on to sort of the line art, I really struggled lining this comic. I wanted to try using a brush that I don't usually use, just to try to give it a different look and take a different approach. Like I said, I'm really trying to experiment. And I think that this experiment was maybe, I don't want to say not successful. I think it was a good experiment in that it taught me a lot about what I do and do not like in my own work. I do not like this brush. I will not be using it again. I think I'll go back to the one that I made for myself. I just think that the lines in this comic are not something that I'm particularly excited about, and I want to be excited about my own work. I think they're perfectly fine. It looks pretty good, but it's just not it doesn't have that special something, it doesn't have that that pizzazz. I'm doing jazz hands, you can't see them. But the pizzazz of it all, it doesn't have that, and I need it to have that because it's my own work. I feel like I should be excited about it. So for next time, I'm going to go back to using the other kind of pen, or a more sort of dead line that doesn't have all the variation. That's my personal preference, and so I really need to just sort of stick to that. But I think that this is a good experiment, and that it reinforced for me that, this is not my preferred way of working. I know what it is. I should probably get back to that. As for the comic itself, this series I'm doing to sort of practice the medium is set in a setting that I've had rattling around in my head for a really long time. It's a sort of gas lamp fantasy, or Victorian fantasy setting, and in the setting there are lots of monsters running around. I took a little bit of inspiration from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, especially in this comic, where it's fisheries are opening up and monsters are coming out. And in addition to that, I think the world itself is just very dangerous, kind of like in Monster Hunter, where there are just these monsters that run around, and people kind of have to deal with them. And essentially sort of at the heart of this story are all of these sort of funny little gentlemen, and some ladies too, but mostly men, who I feel belong to this club that used to be a knightly order and now is more kind of a scientific club. So I think that some of them may technically be knights, or they're knights within the club, quote unquote. They're not actually sir whatever, but they may be kind of titled that in the hierarchy of the club itself. But basically they used to be knights in shining armor killing dragons and stuff, but as society progressed, their role became a little bit different, and I think currently a lot of the club's efforts are going towards studying these monsters rather than just kind of killing them indiscriminately. I'm sure that they're still doing that to an extent, but, we can kill a monster and then dissect it, and that's science, I think, probably, is kind of maybe the ethos more now than it was in yesteryear. So I've been having a lot of fun with this setting. It's a little bit Bloodborne, it's a little bit Monster Hunter, it's a little bit, I don't know what else, just sort of gothic horror science stuff happening. And I'm really excited to come up with more little stories with these little weirdos. And it's just been really fun to play around in a setting that is so, I guess, self-indulgent. It has kind of all of the things that I like a lot in it, and so it's been a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to telling some more. I'm planning to write out a couple more comic ideas soon and then start working on them. I really want to do comics, so I should really be focusing on it more. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited about doing this. I also really want to get into doing comics traditionally, on paper and not on my computer. I got a T ruler recently to help me draw the panels, so I no longer have that excuse to use as to why I can't start doing them traditionally. My only last sort of resort as far as excuses goes is that I don't have any paper. My papers are all so small, but I think that I can get around that if I do, as I said I wanted to do, kind of get into doing pages that have less panels, so each individual panel can be a little bit larger. I do tend to draw quite small to begin with, so I think ultimately it would probably be fine. I'm just concerned. I'm not even really concerned. I don't have any concerns. I just have excuses to not do it. And I need to get rid of them. My excuses definitely include like, oh, my paper is too small. Oh, I don't have a good ruler. Oh, it would be hard. Yeah, it would be hard. It'll be hard, but it'll be okay. So I think I'm going to try to do that for the next one that I make. I really, really want to. I think I'm going to go and get some just like printer paper because I don't have any other paper that isn't in a sketchbook, and I imagine that trying to make a comic in a sketchbook would be kind of a nightmare. I feel like for inking, I want to use I have like a light box or a light thing. It's not really a box. I have something that lights up and you can put it under a piece of paper and then, draw on top of it like a light box. And so I think if I have like loose pieces of paper, then it will be a lot easier to just kind of like put them together and put one on top of the other versus like trying to finagle a sketchbook. And same for scanning them in. It'll be a lot easier to scan them if they are not attached to a book with a spine. So I'm gonna go buy a stack of printer paper and go to town on making comics. I think it'll be fun. It's a little scary. I'm kind of intimidated by the whole thought of it, but I think that it's important to do things that scare you, especially with your art. You gotta put yourself out there. It's the only way that you can grow. So maybe the next video will be me mucking around on a piece of paper. We'll have to see. For the sort of rendering for this piece, I decided to go with just a grayscale kind of tone. I don't know if I will do this again in the future. I think it looks nice on this comic, and with the line work that I did, I really didn't want to go in and do a bunch of hatching. So I'm pretty happy with the end result, but I just don't know if this is like my preference for how I want to be treating my own comic pages. I think I would rather do hatching like I did in my last comic. I'll put like a picture of one of the pages here so you can see what I mean. Or just do like full color. I don't think that the black and white is really, or grayscale, I guess I should say, is really doing anything for me as far as like really sparking something. And I'm trying to make my work so that it sort of sparks something in me, and then presumably when someone else sees it, they'll have a similar reaction, hopefully. And but yeah, that's just something that I'm really trying to work on. Like, I like my artwork and everything, and I don't want it to come across like I don't like it, but I think I really want to focus on making decisions in my art that will lead me to really like connect with it and feel very like excited about it. So I don't know how excited I am about the grayscale. I think it looks fine. It really kind of helps bring everything together, especially since this line work is like not my favorite either. I think that having the tones to kind of like separate things really helps this comic read visually. And it also did end up helping somewhat with kind of the last panel where the monster centipede is kind of poking out from the shadow of the cave just a little bit. So ultimately, I do think that it works, and I don't hate it, but it's not something that I'm probably going to do much of in the future. I think I would rather stick to just sort of like black and white and one mid-tone, or embark on sort of a full color journey. So yeah, that's kind of my plans for moving forward. I feel like I really did learn a ton from this piece. It was kind of an experiment. I learned a lot about drawing buildings and streets and, you know, having two characters interacting more. Like my last comic really only had one character. So I think all of this was great for learning the medium and learning more about how I want to make things in the future. So it's very exciting. I'm pretty pleased with the final result in the end, and I'm also just very excited to like be done with this comic. It has been in the works for almost a month because I just kept putting it off. I think I got a bit in my head about it and how it wasn't like perfect, but I'm really trying to like break away from the very like strong perfectionist streak that I have, because it's just not really helpful for the creative process to be so much of a perfectionist. It really gets in the way, and it's something I'm really working on moving away from. Ultimately, I'm pretty pleased with this comic. I think I had a lot of fun making it. I'm glad that it's done, so I can move on to other things and not have it lingering at the back of my mind that I need to complete this. I'm looking forward to the next pieces that I do and continuing to experiment with stuff and figure out my artistic process and kind of like how I want to go about making the things that I want to make. I also want to read more comics, so if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. I'm not super into like superhero stuff mostly. I do like Hellboy, but generally I'm not super into like superheroes, so you know, any sort of interesting comics. I would take a web comic, but usually something shorter I think might be easier for me to kind of dip my toes in and see if I like it. But yeah, so I'll take recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching this far, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!